Hello, Amy, Boone Thompson, Eamonn Sayers. Guys, thank you so much for joining me from San Diego and from Dublin, both recovering from recent storms and from recent amazing weather. But we have a lot to talk about and an awful lot going on in different parts of the world. And likewise, both of you guys work on a very international basis. So I'm really looking forward to connecting the dots between the space. So maybe Amy, over to you first. Connect the dots for us from your career, what you're doing, and where you are today, because it's quite impressive.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. So my journey began as a college athlete, and soon out of college, I became a personal trainer. So this was back in the 90s. The industry was still in its infancy, if you will. But I was immediately impressed and realized the impact that one fitness professional could make. So that led me on 3 decades of working in this fitness and wellness space, and I like my claim to fame is I've held every job in the industry, from personal trainer, spa, sports, leagues. I ran basketball and volleyball leagues out of clubs. But ultimately, the majority of my work was in leadership, leading large personal training and group exercise teams at the executive level. I also had a chance to work with Les Mills US and growing the Les Mills format and licenses, and that helped me with really getting an introduction to what was happening globally in fitness. And then next, I was contacted by a recruiter who said that they were looking for a unicorn in the industry that had all kinds of unique experiences that could run the leading association called IDEA. And I had already been a member since 1997 when I first became a personal trainer. So it truly was a dream come true to lead IDEA into its next iteration. And then during the pandemic, I had a chance to buy the association. So now I'm the owner and I'm currently leading IDEA. In my spare time, I'm proud to be part of the World Active Collaborative, and I'm serving as chair of World Active. And World Active is bringing together associations globally. We have 52 organizations that are part of World Active. And we have an effort to really unite our sector and work with World Health Organization and the sports federations and others. So that's me.
And Amy, remind me what sport you played again, because I appreciate you can't not all of them can see, but you're quite tall.
Yeah, I'm 6 feet tall, which is small in the sport of basketball now. So I was a basketball player first, a volleyball player second in college, and then I also ran track and field.
Of course you did. Of course you did. Eamon, I'm sorry now to set you up with that one. Amy, to go first. Over to you.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm well used to coming second. I've three sisters and a brother, so that the girls always take over the spotlight in our family. I'm sure if they were here, they'd say otherwise. So I suppose, yeah, my own background in sport, it would be obviously just a sports mad family. My mum and dad would have encouraged us to start playing any and every sport at a very, very early age. I was very lucky at my GA club, which is a Gaelic Games, which is huge, Amy, in Ireland and amongst the Irish diaspora across the world. They very fortunate from the minute we played. There was both a boys and a girls team, and I'm proud to say that the women's team were way better than the men's team in the early stages of my career, and continued on that way. They've even got a mother and others team playing, so people maybe who've retired and, maybe have retired for age reasons or family reasons have gone back and playing mothers and others, which is a super initiative. Then university would have been huge for me. Played too many sports, yeah, too many sports. I'd say a lot of people might say, well, I would say not enough because I've got a great opportunity just to try things. I was clubs officer in my university for 3 years, elected at the University of Limerick, which had been the leading sports university in Ireland. So I got to see all the hardships people have in running amateur sports.
Mm.
And it was probably the start of professional sports in Ireland. Rugby was just beginning to come on track, whilst soccer was beginning to grow after the strength of the Irish soccer team in the 90s. Um, Joined a road safety organization in Dublin, worked with some amazing people, and with a seminal moment in reducing road deaths in Ireland. Left that to join Irish Rugby to create a strategy for the sport at a time when Ireland hadn't won a Grand Slam since the early 50s. And within 5, 6 years of the strategy, both the men and the women had won a Grand Slam, which is basically an undefeated European season of international rugby, which was just phenomenal. Um, Left that again. My cousin suffered a catastrophic injury playing rugby, and it coincided with me leaving Irish Rugby. And I ended up working primarily in the startup space, a lot of tech companies, and managing what's called the Guinness Enterprise Centre. And again, you got to see the gender inequality and inequality on a numbers basis of women entrepreneurs, not enough of them, and how could we help to change that? So it was kind of an underlying philosophy in my work in helping early stage companies and continuing to do that. And more lately, working as a board member with her sport.
And Eamon, just tease that a little bit for us, because you've got background obviously in business, but you've been an awful lot of time in sport and the business side of sport, which is obviously impressive. And thank you as well for the rugby, the rugby, all the work there. But her sport, I mean, this is how we got connected recently as well. I was lucky enough to meet you in person at the recent awards. But tease it out for us. What is her sport, and why are you so passionate about it? Again, as a male person in sport, because this is a really powerful story.
Yeah, well, timing they say is everything, and sometimes your minds are, some areas of life you're more alert to, and it just so happened Irish Rugby were looking at the clubs, and if you were a women's club, you were not recognised as being a senior club, even though you were playing at the same level as the men's clubs. And it went to a vote, and my club decided to vote against it. And I told them that if they did vote against it, I would leave the club, and I did. I was just, you need to put lines in the sand, but you also need to follow through on what you say. And it just so happened, timing wise, I was lucky enough to meet Niamh Talon via Zoom call during COVID, where she was presenting what she was working on. And I was blown away by what she was doing. And I just contacted her afterwards and said, look, whatever I can do to help, I will. Not having put too much thought of what I will meant. But Niamh and Mohammed, our co-founder, have just driven it on to extraordinary levels at a pace, a really quick pace. And it's all about addressing the gender inequality in sport, but making it equal for everyone, making it equal for boys and girls. And obviously, boys have a head start, be it facilities, be it legacies, but there's a huge growing momentum now where people are genuinely saying, no, that's wrong. That's, what went before we can't change, but we can change the future and let the future be now. And that's what her sports are driving.
It's impressive, and I was luckily enough, and as I said, mentioned that the awards recently. Amy, it was inspiring because there's so much work going on, and I know obviously this is a kind of a global trend that we're seeing, focus on equality of access, and I mean it shouldn't sound surprising, but it is reality across most parts of the world today that girls don't have the same access, to sport as well as to fitness. And Amy, I'm heading out in a few weeks, as you know, to Riyadh. And obviously, there's a lot of work going on there and Beyond Active and so on. And that's a great example of it's only the last few years that there's been gyms available for girls. So yeah. You're seeing the same in the States, I imagine. I'm sure you're following the basketball last year. I was lucky enough to be in Boston, seeing the amazing, just euphoric rise of the likes of Caitlin Clark and more. What's your thoughts on the sport and fitness and the changes happening?
Yeah, so first, I have a niece who is a professional rugby player. Fun coincidence. She's American Tongan, so she's playing for Tonga, and she's traveling and around. But she can't travel right now because she does not have the funds, and there is no funding for this team. The girls actually have to pay to play so they can travel. And her mom happens to work for Delta, which helps, but she can't play right now because they don't have funding. So that's, as a side note, it's a perfect example of how that sport is still emerging and looking for resource. But yeah, in the US right now, women's sports are having a moment between volleyball. Volleyball now has 2 professional leagues that are popping up here in the US. So girls have more chances to play after their college career. Back in the 90s, when I came out of college, I was playing on a semi-pro women's league. It was at the same time women's NBA started, and we were the feeder league. So we were the National Women's Basketball League, and we were feeding into the women's NBA and giving these ladies a chance to keep competing in their careers. So that league unfortunately folded due to no funding. But we've seen the women's NBA continue to thrive and emerge. So I think it's an exciting time for women's sport, but at the same time, it spotlights the work that we still need to do and some of the inequalities with access. When we think about fitness and we think about equality in fitness, I think it's, again, better than it ever has been, probably, with more access and more opportunities. But still, you'll see in fitness clubs often, or in our spaces, oftentimes more visibility is given or more opportunity is given to the men's access to the courts or access to the facilities. It's challenging to pull together, especially for team sport, groups of women in communities, because they may not feel, welcome, or they don't have the resource, or they don't feel that they can play. Whereas, men's leagues and sports are pretty easy to pull together and get going. So it's an interesting time with all the spotlight, but also the work we have to do.
And just a call out there, I think intentional action. Eamonn, you made an intentional action at one point for the club there, and Amy, there's lots like that has to be done on both sides. Whether you're the actual athlete, whether you're supporting a female team, or whether you're a male sports, we need more intentional action to make change. The wishing and hoping and watching is just not good enough. And for all the ones everyone listening here, my kind of call to action really is ask, what can you do to be part of the solution? Not to just sit back and kind of see that evolve, but actually, what can you actually do to make growth and change in the right direction? On that, Amy, tease out more for me as well for the audience around World Active, what it is, what's the goal, where is it, and how again, what's to expect coming down the track.
Yeah. Yeah, so World Active is in its infancy. We're just a few years old. During the pandemic, all of us globally realized that nobody knew who to look to, who were the leaders in the fitness and wellness sector, and how do we get a seat at the table to have important conversations that affect all of our businesses and the health of all humans globally. So we came together, leading associations all over the world. Everyone is welcome. Our goal was to get representation on every continent and in every country. So fast forward to today, we have some key initiatives that really drive our purpose, one of which is diversity and inclusion. And that means diversity in our workspace, as well as diversity for the people we serve. And so this particular committee is focused on competitive wages for male and female. It's looking at executive leadership. There's big disparity still. In my career, I was one of 2 women in a group of 100 CEOs. 2 female executives in a room of 100 in the US just a few years ago, and it hasn't moved much. That's unacceptable. And so we're focused on how to provide more leadership, executive opportunities, funding to start businesses. There's a big trickle effect that goes all the way through. And then we will also be focused on the people we serve, giving access to our services and to our health clubs and to all the stakeholders in our communities. And how do we get more females involved in health and fitness and wellness? So,
and Amy, you met recently with Fiona Bull, I know, and some others in the industry. Is it trending the right direction? Is it fast enough? Do you feel WHO appreciates the impact the industry has on health, or is it still some maturing to do?
Still, I believe that a lot of the good work is being done, but it's being done in silos. And so the challenge now is bringing everyone together to align on either a marketing campaign or a funding or an awareness campaign that will really help us all move together in the right direction and make tidal waves instead of ripples, right? If we all come together, we can move these initiatives so much faster. So I feel like a lot of people are like, yeah, we definitely stand behind that initiative and we feel it's important. But like you were just saying, like you have to be part of the movement. You can't just sit by and wait for others to make it happen. So I think that's where we're at. We'll probably have a bit of a hiccup now with the change in leadership in the US and the things that are happening here. We'll have a bit of a hiccup, but our goals and our passion is definitely still intact.
Let's come back to that hiccup with the change of leadership in the US in a moment. But Eamonn, just one thing that Amy pulled out there that I want to tap into is again around that CEOs and executives, and you mentioned as well around female leaders and owners and so on. So I feel like we've got two sides to this coin. One is we don't have enough women stepping up and stepping forward. And then we also have the potentially unconscious or conscious bias that creates the barrier once they're stepping up in order to get into that position, whether it's for funding or whether it's for ownership. So what are you seeing, from the Guinness Enterprise Centre body work that you've been doing there, and obviously through sport and through business through over the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate in the GC. I inherited a very, very small team of three women as their, dare I call it, manager stroke leader. Liz and Linda and Mary. There was just, to say I'd learned a hell of a lot more than they ever did off me. We continued on that. Like I was just, in advance of this chat here, I was just writing down all the people who worked on the team, and it was a 5-to-1 majority of women throughout the whole program. And you're using the word there about women stepping up. I challenge that's the wrong way of looking at it. It's about women being identified as, for what they've done, the merits that they have, they have similar job skills to the boys. They just started at a lower level, and that's the legacy issue. So like equality means everyone should get the same, but I think when it comes to closing this gap, and Amy, you're using the phrase tidal wave rather than ripple, then it has to be about equity. It can't be about equality. Equality is dare I say it, is the easy street. Equity is where we need to be playing this game. One of the things we did in the GC was any event that we ran ourselves, we always had at the very minimum an equal number of speakers, of boys and girls. And anytime we didn't, invariably I'd step down from going up. I wouldn't MC or I wouldn't sit on the panel. So it was an easy out, because we just had to, if we're not doing it, then why would others do it? Anytime people came and approached us to take space, we always encouraged them to include women on their panel. So, it became part of the culture in the GEC. And we went from a scenario of less than 10% women entrepreneurs to, by the time I left, we were over 30%. But it was an organic journey. It wasn't like that we went out on the street and pulled people. It just became out on the street, people realized we're being treated better and with a better voice. And it came to a stage where women entrepreneurs were given out to me, which I was, in hindsight, delighted with. But initially, I was shocked where they said, "No, Eamonn, I'm here because I'm an entrepreneur." They didn't need to identify that they were a woman or a man. They were saying, "No, I'm here fully on my merits, that I'm stepping up and I'm speaking on this panel on everything I've done, not who I am or what label you put on me." And, that was really powerful for me to hear. And I was thrilled with it. Don't get me wrong, absolutely thrilled with it. And I almost, I was swallowing back my shame of, contacting them because I was a woman entrepreneur. And we need to see more of that.
So it is a balance though, isn't it? No, it's great because you're right. Like we're looking for, equality, right? Where the person gets hired for the job because they're the best person for the job, or they get, the funding because it's the best business idea that's on the palette at the time. And that's really where we want to get to. And I'm finding that we're in this middle ground, it feels like, of saying just hire the best person for the job, promote the best person for the job. Ideally, there's a bit, as I said, identifying who's the best talent, regardless of gender. And then there's this balance of it has to be intentional. There's a bit of outreach as well as it coming at you. So I feel like that I think you're in the right boat, Eamon. I'm glad that you took the you said you got given out to and you nearly enjoyed it, which is okay too. It definitely shows you had three sisters growing up. I can see the link of how that came about. But I think you're right. It's a balance of this trying to be proactive at the same time as acknowledging that it's the best person for the job, it's the best business case, it's the best investment are still what we're looking for. And then the goal being that the equality and the gender balance will kind of happen naturally and a bit organically. But I think we are at this kind of, as I said, dance in the middle. And I'm conscious that in Europe, Amy, we have an EU directive coming in next year in 2026, which is around board directors and gender representation on the boards. So for a non-executive director, it has to be at least 40% female on the board. And I kind of feel like two things about quotas and mandates here is that we shouldn't need them. It would be lovely for us not to need them to be a mandate. But, this has been a conversation for 15, 20 years, give or take, and it obviously hasn't got to anywhere close to equality. So the mandate is coming in order to progress it. But one of the previous guests also on the podcast was very clear around we need then to make sure, again, we're hiring for the right people with the right skill sets, with the right training and background and experience, so that it's quality, not just a tokenism of if they happen to be a female, we'll pull them on and they'll be quiet and it'll be tokenism and tick the box. That's going to be the worst case scenario. And then that won't be beneficial to anybody, especially as we look at, some of the statistics around the world being on the female health side, women are more inactive. Women have, lower health rates and obviously have higher, bigger issues and obviously spend more time in ill health and so on. So there's plenty of factors there which we need to pull in. So, Amy, what's your thoughts around this? And again, going back to maybe the US change possibly happening, is there a
Yeah.
tie in
Well,
there?
I agree that we should hire for merit and we should hire for qualifications, but you can see the result of that, and the result of that is still not showing that there is equity. And so I think you use the word intentional. We have to be intentional about making sure that we're providing the growth and development opportunities to more people, and I'll include diversity, not just women, but minorities. And
Right.
you want a diverse work pool, you have to develop everyone at an equal and equitable rate. And that's the challenge. If you just go out and look for qualifications, I'll use the example of two women in a room of 100 CEOs, and you're hiring a CEO, of course you're going to hire a man because they have had more experience and opportunities to be developed for that role. So is it changing? Yes. In my career, I've seen lots of growth in this respect, and more women are getting development opportunities to be ready for these roles in senior leadership and in ownership. But you have to be intentional that you're going to cast an equitable search, and that you're giving development opportunities to everyone. So, as an example, we recognize that for fitness professionals, which is who we serve, the practitioners, that people are not finding leadership in their organizations anymore. A lot of mid-level managers were let go as a cost-saving measure as businesses were struggling. And so now the workforce in a lot of club chains and fitness and wellness centers, they're not getting any leadership and development. It's basically just sink or swim, even more so than ever because there's no middle management. So we've started a mentorship program of our own where we're identifying people that are seeking leadership. We're providing the guidance and mentorship to them to help them develop through various stages of their career and whatever their aspirations are. But that's an example of reaching out, lifting up the next generation, and finding ways for them to gain experiences where it's challenging in a remote workforce with very little leadership in our organizations because of finances and for those reasons. We need more organizations that are organically and intentionally bringing up the next generation.
Eamon, what would you say to any leader who's not on the page of taking intentional action?
Look at yourself in the mirror. It would be the first, like one of the things it's becoming more and more noticeable. I think social media it can be a huge driver of this, because if you don't do it, if you do things that are out of kilter with social norms now, which I think equality and equity is becoming, you can be pulled up on it very, very fast. You can be in a bad news headline all of a sudden. So the unintended consequences of just going about and being the same person that you are, we all need to grow at a constantly. No matter what age group we're at, we need to grow, we need to learn, and we need to move with society. And I encourage people to do that, to look at themselves, but also to look at their friends, to look at the people that they regularly, meet. And it's not a calling them out. You're not trying to embarrass people here. You're just trying to show a perspective, ask them to dwell in it. Particularly if they're successful, the reason they're successful is they've made good calls, towards the future. So, highlight it quietly with them, let them dwell on it, and maybe go back to them 6 weeks, maybe even 6 months to say, well, on our last chat, have things changed? And sometimes you're just looking for the smallest piece of change, because the smallest piece of change can then eventually become the norm. Once they're on the trajectory, that's the first step.
So important. And I like what, and Amy, thank you as well for that. Based upon where we are with the US and the recent changes, and I do appreciate that we seem to have the word DEI been criticized and been negative and been removed in certain initiatives. So what's your thoughts?
For me,
Yeah.
it's very fresh. It's very new. So we're having this conversation at the end of January. So all of this is just transpiring. You know, I part of me just is very concerned about all the good work that I feel that we've done in the last couple of years, and that I worry that we'll take two steps backwards. And so for me, I'm concerned. I'm worried about where we go from here. I'm all for resetting if the intention and the initiative is still there, but we can't see yet if the intention and the initiative is still there. And so I'm worried for our country.
Yeah. Because of your career and because you've had such an amazing, inspirational career with it, if you look at the leaders coming out of college today or just entering the industry, what would be the lessons or the thoughts that you'd like to plant to the male and female who are saying, I love what Amy has achieved and I'd love to be able to get to that height? How do they follow your footsteps? What are the lessons they might and the pitfalls they might avoid, as well as the things to make sure that they do?
Well, it's interesting. I never ever imagined this career path for myself. It was, I mean, fitness and wellness, personal training was brand new when I came out of college. Like we were just a brand new little industry. But what I know were my pillars, because of my background in sport and being an athlete. I was taught from a very, very young age that first I lead with my coach called it being a lady, then a student, then an athlete. But to me in business and through my career, what that's meant for me is first is character. Like the way you show up in this world and the way you interact in every interaction, whether it's with a customer or with your colleagues or even your friends, you leave an impression, you leave breadcrumbs for your next opportunities. So your character is the most important thing that you can lead in this world with. Second, to me, being a student means always leading with curiosity. And I've led in with curiosity in every step of my career. Even if it was a job I was like, oh, I hated going to work every day, like the 5 a.m. shift, opening the club. What's the blessing in that? How can I get better? What is this going to teach me? And in that example, it taught me how to interact. Working the floor at 5 a.m., it taught me about, well, one, getting up early, time management, working hard. But it taught me, I got to interface with people from all walks of life in the club every single day, and just so many blessings from some of the experiences that I initially didn't want to be part of. And then the third pillar is that of being an athlete. And to me, being an athlete has taught me grit, perseverance, competitiveness. I'm competitive with myself, but also with my teammates and with others in World Active, as an example. Like if we have goals, we've got to move these initiatives purposefully, intentionally. So I constantly set goals for myself in business, personally and professionally, and that's my competitive nature, the grit and the tenacity that I learned. So those are the three pillars: character and curiosity and competitiveness, I'll say.
Love it. And no surprise when we look at leadership that 94%, at least on the female side, would associate themselves with being an athlete of some description. No doubt it's similar on the male side because of those lessons and exactly what you just said. You learn those lessons in sport, you bring them to business, and that hence you become, competitive and leadership and everything else with it. Eamon, what are the lessons from your side? Likewise, from someone starting out with the business, as your foundation, but likewise having massive impact in sport and in health and in equality and equity and like so much impact.
Yeah, I can only echo what Amy has said, particularly character. And, you're too young to understand what that actually means. You probably almost need to read, reference books to understand and look back at all the different moments.
I thought you were
Like
saying I was
I
too young,
remember,
Eamon. I was
I
taking the
know.
compliment
We
there
were
for a
like,
second.
we're so
like,
young.
one of my dad's favorite story about me as a kid in sport. He said I was about 9 or 10 playing under 14s, and apparently I went over to him crying out in the pitch. The game hadn't even started, and I went over to him on the sideline of the pitch because I was disgusted because the other team. In Ireland at the time, you were allowed to have boys and girls in the team, but the other team had put a girl marking me, and I was saying, but I can't hurt her, I can't shoulder her, I can't, and so my dad always brings that up as a story, like, no, but like the first thing about sporting is about winning and losing at the end, but actually it's not. Every single famous sports star has lost. It's how they, came back from that loss. In some cases, like in the NBA, you can come back the next day. So you have 24-hour recovery, whilst for Olympians they have to wait 4 more years.
Mm.
So the parallels in sport into business immediately is obvious. You got to, if you're trying to win a contract, you got to get all the prep work. You got to get past the first line, which means you have to be, go from being, dare I call it, an amateur sports person to an elite sports person. So, you need to build a community in the same way. In the same way, you need to build a team. You need to build a team. You need to lead. You need to know when to step back, even when you are the leader. And sometimes just by having the label leader doesn't mean you're the leader of the team. It might mean you're the better voice in the dressing room, but on the pitch, people might look elsewhere. In the same way, when you're making, presentations, there are peoples in your team who are better than you. And the idea, I always see it as a leader, is get out of their way. They're making you and your whole organization better. Give them what they need to grow, but bring other people along as well. The person who might be seen as the weakest link, absolutely they might be the weakest link, but if you don't make them a stronger link, then you're still at fault when the team falters. So it's about encouraging, it's about building rapport, it's about understanding where people are coming from, and also then buying into a bigger idea. So the collective becomes so much more important than the individual. And very quickly, you'll find out, are people following, or are you just the manager? And in an
Yeah.
ideal case scenario, you're a leader and people are following. The last thing you want to be, obviously, you have to have managers to manage the sports teams, but I'm talking about in business, the best managers are, in actual fact, are leaders. And there's a big gap between the two roles in a company.
Great shout out, difference between managers and leaders. Yeah, and I think we could take it for granted as three people who are big into sport. There's no surprise that not only are leaders athletes, but also that for those athletes going into corporate leadership and coaching and being speakers at a corporate space, no surprise that that's a natural evolution. And you're right, actually, Eamon. We take it probably for granted a little bit that all of these pieces of it said your character that you build over time and the ability to lose and come back and recover and be resilient. We take it for granted, and I think Amy, you're like me. We are our professional and personal lives overlap because we started out in that space of being active and then ultimately driving on from being the ones in the sport to being the one on the sideline and so on with it. But you must do that as well, right? You're in corporates, I'm assuming, educating leaders on bringing through the sporting
Yeah.
storyline that Eamon's just expressed as well.
Yes. And I'll relate it as like this. When I was first a personal trainer, I was responsible for impacting the lives and the success and the journeys of my individual clients. So I was leading firsthand. It was between me and the client and that relationship. And And there was a lot of value and joy, and I learned so much in that experience. When I took my first management opportunity, it was really difficult for me to make that step because I was giving up the one-on-one interaction, and I knew then I was only as good as the personal trainers I was leading, so they could impact their pool of clients. So on the good news, like now, indirectly, I was able to influence and impact 10 times as many clients as I could before. And I had to learn to embrace that leadership role. And the work that I was doing was indirectly motivating. Fast forward to the next leadership position where now I'm influencing managers who influence personal trainers. I had to lean on a whole different skill set in order to be able to effectively motivate managers who would then motivate personal trainers who would then motivate the end client. So now as an owner, I get to impact hundreds of thousands of fitness professionals who get to impact millions of consumers, but it leans on different leadership skills in each scenario. And it's not for everybody. I have lots of fitness professionals who are very, very happy in the one-on-one face-to-face. But to take someone through this growth and development of learning how to truly impact people through others is a challenge as a leader, and it was more difficult for me to navigate than I would have thought at the time when I accepted those roles.
Well, and I had the privilege of watching you on stage present, and you're definitely very engaging, very inspiring. So yeah, you've gone through, I'm sure, the experience of learning to be uncomfortable and learning to articulate and inspire, and definitely you've achieved that. So thank you for that. Pulling that thread, Eamon, and that connecting the dot. When we look at the likes of her sport and connecting the dot around social impact, and as Amy mentioned there, the likes of Niamh Talon, who's trying to not only influence her team, her direct team, but ultimately the companies that are working with the brand and the association, and obviously what they're trying to do with their brand, influence customers and clubs, and like the ripple and the ripple and the ripple and the ripple and the ripple is a very long chain here. So Eamon, give us a little bit about that, because part of what I'm hoping with this podcast, as well as we're sharing the stories that people don't know. People who are in the echo chamber of sport and the impact of sport and likes of her sport, know about what's going on. But there's plenty of businesses and business leaders and people across Ireland, as well as the diaspora and beyond, that don't know what these organizations need. So give us a little bit of a context there for those that have no idea what these organizations do and how they operate and how they can help.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the irony is they actually can help, but to a large extent, they just don't know how. So so I think for a lot of them, actually, if you can find the path for them and point them, I think they actually are looking for the path. It's up to the likes of Her Sport and other organizations to show them the way, to show them that it's quite possible, and it's all small steps, not a big bang. Like when you look across industries, one of the key outside of sport, first of all, from a business perspective, virtually every grouping are talking about equality and about diversity within their business. So they want more women, they want people from different backgrounds and nationalities participating and working. And obviously, sport is an obvious social side of that to a large extent. Now, some professional sports put it in the space of entertainment, but I still think it's more sociable and social than it is entertainment per se. So finding that path and finding that the values of companies that are genuinely reflecting that and want to showcase not just to their staff, but they also want to show the next generation our company is of a standard where you will want to work with us. And look at how we're helping driving equality and equity across the world beyond the barriers and the scope of our workplace. We're helping driving it into the community. And obviously, the bigger the corporates, the bigger global footprint and impact they can make with this regard. And don't doubt it for a second. If we can get this right, we're going to impact society, beyond our shores and beyond the levels we can even dream of. Because the inequity across the world in all aspects of life is monumentally scary.
And you mentioned like the impact there. So business is a call to action, I suppose, really is no matter how big or small your business is, there's an impact you can make, but also there's a positive association and there's a ripple that you can start regardless of how big, small or indifferent. And reality as well as, the communities that businesses operate in are the employees as well as customers. So it's a win-win-win. There's no negative on this, whether it's for health or the business is completely different. We mentioned at the start around rugby, and I know Iona Maher was amazing during the World Cup or the Olympics last year, and I realized some of the statistics around this, which I think is impressive. I think she entered the Olympics having like 2 million followers and exited the Olympics with 6 million followers. So she is officially the greatest athlete with the most number of followers, I think, in the world, regardless of sport, regardless of gender, and regardless, obviously, of salary and everything and sponsorship with it. So, phenomenal. We still have a challenge, I think, in the world of the equitable visibility of sports. And this is the same as we talked about, whether it's, fitness opportunities, whether it's, leaders like Amy being the only 2 of the 100 in the room. The visibility is still a challenge. Olympics in France did a better job, but when you look at the statistics, actually, we still saw less time of women's athletes on social media, on TV, and so on. So we still have a bit of stretch to go there to get that. But then the likes of Iona Maher is just an inspirational, leader. And I love the fact that she is just killing it on the pitch as well as off. But Amy, going back to your point there, like you mentioned your cousin in Tonga, that seems to be the norm still. So we have to have the corporate think about the sponsorship and the support that they can do. And there's no end to this. There's no reason not to, I would think.
Well, I think I wasn't aware that Iona, am I pronouncing her name right? Ilona.
I think so. I think I am too, but I could be wrong.
She had the most followers. So what will be really interesting at the end of 2024 is to see if her earnings are equal to the male athletes that have similar followings. That will be the true test, which we probably know that's not going to happen. So let's give her a few years, but I love that she's getting visibility. I think so. When I pointed out that story, we talked about, well, what can you do? So I would challenge, if you're a club operator, if you're leading sports or team, right now, our youth are really challenged with, especially in the US, the club model has emerged. And I'm a guilty parent of investing in club sports for my children, where I know that children in our community are not given equal access to sport because they don't have physical education programs. There's not state and city funded recreation programs that children can compete in. And what it's doing is not only affecting the health and wellness of our country, but it's really impacting people's ability to compete beyond the age of 5 or even to start in sport. And so that's a really big challenge that we're faced with. I know in California right now, our governor and our governor's wife set up a foundation where they're trying to really bring a spotlight to creating more equity and access for young children to be introduced to sport and to get these physical education classes. But it's a perfect example. So if you are an operator, what can you do in your own brick and mortar? What can you do in your own community to provide sports or physical activity or classes, kids classes to the youth in your own community? That's tangible. That's actionable. You can do something right now. If you're a fitness professional, open some classes in your park, go to the city and create a program where young children can come and enjoy physical activity with their parents. There's so much that we can do right now with what we have access to. So that's an example.
And that's a really good point. I think we need to make sure that we're calling it out here. Sport and physical activity and movement and fitness. I think we're kind of using the words interchangeably a little bit just for those that are listening, because I do appreciate sport. Is only about 6% of people are actually in a sports team. And obviously that reduces with age. Whereas, fitness, depending on the country you're in, might be somewhere between 11 to 25%. Likewise, obviously every kid is in school, but not every kid has a PE curriculum and program. And there's some great solutions. So so just to maybe call out here, I think to your point is everybody can contribute in some shape or form, but we have, I think it's 80% of adolescents and kids not being active enough in accordance to the WHO guidelines. and some recent research that from Ireland as well, around 90% of kids can't properly, kick, run, jump, or throw. And that's a phenomenal, that's a scary statistic. And it just shows that we have to act now. Like now, there's no, we're in a crisis. We know for the last number of years we've had an inactivity crisis, but we're absolutely not trending in the right direction. I think we're going in the opposite direction in a global basis. So, Eamonn, what would you like to add to that?
Well, the first thing when you mentioned Ilona, I'm a rugby sevens referee, and way back maybe 5 years ago when Ilona wasn't known, I refereed her in a tournament in Barbados. So there's a guy called Brian Stallmeyer from Trinidad and Tobago started a sevens rugby tournament and I started refereeing it back in 2012, which shows my baldness and my greyness of hair. But Brian started that event. It's a boys and girls, men and women, but the major cash prize is for the women.
Oh,
And I've never come across any competition in any sport where they're both sharing the exact same facilities, dressing rooms, crack and fun, etc. But I think, if I recall, approximately $10,000 for the women's team that wins, whilst $1,000 for the men's team that wins. And Brian never gets the recognition for that. But Ilona was playing in it, and
wow.
she was the player of the tournament. And I think she'd only just started playing maybe a year, 2 years before that, and such a shy individual. But her playing style is just so. Well, if I was an athlete opposite, I'd say ominous. But from a spectator point of view, it was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So yes, but we were speaking about corporates and health and sport and lifestyle. A fitter person is a better employee.
Mhm.
Is the first thing. You're going to get much better results and time and energy from your fit employee. So they don't have to be elite sports people. They don't have to be even playing sport. They can be just going to the gym on a regular basis, or they can be just simply out, as Amy points out in the local park, kicking ball, etc. But the other thing in corporate world, and I think one of the things that's often highlighted, is the pay gap. That's, I think, maybe 13-14% of a difference here in Ireland, the pay gap at executive level. But bring that pay gap into sport.
Mm.
Pay gap into sport is just monstrously huge, and so disappointing that all these corporates who get behind and invest in sport, be it as corporate sponsors, as buying tickets, corporate boxes, etc., entertaining clients, etc., they bring them all to the men's games. They rarely bring them to the women's games. So that's a simple change they can start doing. They can start ring fencing some of the money that they give towards the sports that they know are being delivered towards the men's elite teams. Let's get it down into the active space. Let's get that money into make the women better paid. So there are a lot of, we'll say, opportunities for corporate to genuinely reflect on society and to push equality and push a more active lifestyle. So Amy, well done on the World Active. I love the idea. And it can be done so simply.
We're looking for corporate sponsors as well at World Active, so just putting it out there.
And good call out, actually, Amy. What is the call out to the world to support
Yeah.
everything that you're doing? What else is
Yeah.
there bar sponsorship? I'm assuming sponsorship is definitely top of the list.
Yeah, so we're still organizing the membership details right now. It's just getting involved and putting your name in the hat to support the initiatives. If you are an executive at an association anywhere in the world, we need to hear from you now because we'd love to get you involved. If it's sport, if it's Pilates, if it's recreation, whatever it is, if it involves physical activity or the health of the world, then we want to hear from you. And if you're a fitness professional, then IDEA Health and Fitness Association is here to support you. We are a global association based in the US, but we're global. We're in our 43rd year of being a global leader of fitness professionals. And so those would be my call to actions for anyone listening.
Love it. And Eamonn, thank you for those call to actions. Is there any other call to action, Eamonn, for those that are listening? Because I said we are going to be intentionally sharing with as many corporates, as many leaders as we possibly can. So making it super clear for everybody who doesn't know the landscape, what can they do? What can they do now? I think is really beneficial.
Yeah, well, for everybody who will say, even in my own community, if we started attending women's sports events, and bringing families along, bringing best friends along, turning it into a great day. Because the best sporting events I've been at weren't necessarily the actual out on the pitch or out on the court. It was actually the fact that I was with my friends and we were sharing time or having loads of fun together. Uh, you know, we can do that at women's events as much as we can do that with men's events. And actually, can we get them mixed? Can we get on the same day at the same venue? Can we get
Right.
the women and men playing at the same,
Yeah.
and at times, let the women's game be the later kickoff, at a time that's more suitable for more people to attend. Like always growing up, the men's had the GA club at home. The men have the 7:30 p.m. slot with the main
Wow.
pitch for training purposes. And like my memory, I can still see the women's and they're waiting for us to get off the pitch. And I remember my dad in charge. My dad used to immediately, right, we'll give you half of it. As soon as he saw them warming up, and he'd bring it and turn our 15 aside game into a backs and forwards game, just to accommodate, etc. But it needs to be, it can't be an afterthought. It has to be pre-planned. It has to be at the start of the club year when we're deciding, well, how are we going to help each other? Every second year, maybe it's the women get the Tuesdays and Thursdays and the boys get the Mondays and Wednesdays. So let's create a new tradition. You know,
Mm.
Yeah.
like tradition is the greatest legacy in sport, but sometimes it's the worst thing in sport because it can hold organizations and entities back.
Yes.
Because if you start losing on the pitch, it means people are doing better ways of doing things. They've changed their traditions. So let's be proactive in doing the same.
I love that. And one thing to add to that, because you're right, attending the events is obviously what drives revenue. It also drives eyeballs and it drives media and it drives sponsorship and so on. Shout out to the media in relation to sports and making sure we have actual visibility of when the sports are on and where. So I think it's about 10%, give or take, of international sports media is on women's sports, and that's a fairly global statistic, I think. So visibility is important because, like as you mentioned, Damon, if it's a good thing to go for family or whatever, they need to know about it. They need to know in advance. They need to know that there's whatever game is being played at whatever location, and there's an opportunity to attend and so on. So visibility. So the media have got to do better, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough today to use it as an excuse that didn't have female pundits or didn't have female access to information. That's not the world we live in today. And Amy, we had a
Yeah,
few
but
months back, we had an
I
event
think
on TV about Irish sport, and there were 6 men only, no women. I was like, come on, 2024, we can do better. Sorry, Amy, I got across you.
Yeah, but I think where we are at this stage now, and I think events in November in America would almost highlight it. We can't rely on the media anymore. We got to rely on ourselves. You speak about Alona Mara, 6 million followers. Social media has made the jump for equality and equity much closer and much more reachable and achievable because now it's in control of the people who matter, the people who follow you. You can push them, and the more people who follow you, just the knock-on effect. It's always about two or three people doing something are crazy lunatics. 20 people doing it are a movement. It's not a huge leap.
Mm.
Two people playing ball. Paddle has become the new big sporting craze. Where was that 5 years ago? And all of a sudden, the most well-known celebrities across different industries are talking about playing it. So why can't we talk about women's sport in the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. No, totally agree there. And look, I'm conscious of time. We could talk about this all day. We've got some very clear call to actions there. So the takeaways for the listener, I think, is important. Eamon, as a leader that you're driving change, as a leader, who are the other leaders that people listening or myself need to know about that are making change and likewise should be visible on our radars to watch what they're doing, how they're doing, amplifying their success? Who are those leaders that are worth calling out?
Well, maybe just with my Irish hat on very briefly, we got to look back. The leaders in Ireland, like Ireland, has made huge changes socially, without, I would say, huge fanfare globally. Be it the Mary Robinson and Mary McAleese becoming our presidents down through the years, and then the Irish people with their different votes on divorce and abortion and gay rights, etc. It's just been so like there's leadership in a country when we're talking about, because equity and equality is about a global challenge. Ireland's stance on Palestine.
Mm.
I've been involved with the Ukraine Crisis Centre here in Ireland as soon as the war started. So like Ireland is showing global leadership on society and social issues. Closer to home, my mother was just phenomenal, and my sisters. I'd have to, and it's not a case of having to. They're just phenomenal people in helping others, and that's just the way we're brought up. And then on a personal level, I have to say the likes of Caroline Spillane, who's the chief executive of the Institute of Directors in Ireland. Like Caroline is just, she doesn't know this, but she's one of my key mentors. If I, anytime I have an issue beyond my ability to think, Caroline is one of the first people I pick up the phone to have a good conversation with. And then the next generation, we've mentioned her name 2 or 3 times already, what Niamh Talon is doing. And it's not only what she's doing, but how she's going about it and how she's bringing people with her. It's just an absolute privilege just to be in the same room and listen. That's a person that we all need to get behind and help. And helping mightn't necessarily be the obvious. It might be just removing barriers. It might be just making an introduction. It can be the smallest, simplest thing. I had a conversation with a lady entrepreneur yesterday, and she was telling me that another entrepreneur was thanking her for something that changed her business. And Orla, the lady I was speaking to, she didn't have a clue. She had no memory of it, because none of us know the smallest thing can tip this conversation in a really positive way.
Great shout out, Caroline Spillane. Absolutely phenomenal what she's doing. I'm loving the level. She's changing the level, Amy, in a global way around the directorship and the level of directors and the quality and the infrastructure around that. So great call out. And Niamh, we talked about as well. I don't know Eamonn's mother or sisters, but that might sound like they might be on my list at some point, Eamon. We'll come back to that conversation. But Amy, who would you like to call out?
Yes. Oh, so I didn't share this, but I'm the third born of 10 children. So I have 4 sisters and 5 brothers.
Wow.
And so shout out to big families. We literally had 2 basketball teams in my family. And the girls happened to be older, so we were the caretakers and we beat up on our brothers all the time. But anyway, I would love to first recognize the work that you're doing, Grace, this collective that you've put together. I know you're in your infancy, but I know the women that you've surrounded yourself with are badass. And so I just can't wait to see what you do with this collective and this organization. I have amazing people at World Active who are leading change, doing it from the kindness of their hearts. There is no compensation for these leaders who are fighting the good fight every day to help unite our sector. So I want to shout out all the leaders at World Active, the council, the association. But at IDEA, we get the privilege of putting people on stage every year. We get to spotlight future leaders through our IDEA Fitness Journal. At IDEA World, we give out industry awards. And so this past year, we recognized she's not an emerging leader. She has been someone I've admired for a very long time. But in this chapter of her life, she is really impacting communities she's created her own dance format, and it's all about mindfulness and movement and inclusivity. And that is Ingrid Knight Cohey. She's in Vancouver. Again, she's been around as long as I have, holding similar roles in the industry, but I love what she's doing in this next chapter of her career. And then one of our emerging leaders, Ruben Perea, it's a man, but he's phenomenal. And he's doing some great work with the boomers and really making sure that there's accessibility and equality and equity for boomers movements. So yeah, we spotlight a lot of people on stage, and there's so many remarkable female leaders and male leaders who are coming up to take the next chapter and to pass the baton on to someone else, or the microphone, if you will. So those are just a few.
Excellent. I will definitely look for 2 introductions to Ruben and Ingrid, because I don't have them in my network, which is fantastic, because the more we work together, and thank you, Amy, as well for the call out. I mean, the purpose of the collective, for those that are listening, is around working collectively and bringing together all of the good stuff that's happening. As we mentioned, we have an inactivity crisis, we have a health crisis, we have a lot of benefits to working together, be it across health, be it across fitness, be it across sport, be it across business, be just the right thing to do. And you're right, equity and equality take action, intentional action, and it needs to be us working together to do that. So it's very much around, as Eamonn mentioned, around what Niamh is doing is bringing everyone on the journey together, because it's a win-win-win-win-win-win scenario. So yeah, thank you, Amy, and it is a pleasure. And likewise, you guys have been phenomenal, great today, but also before, during, and after this conversation. I look forward to kind of continuing it and making more ripples and hopefully tsunamis at the later point.
Yes.
Amy, Amy, I just want to echo what you just said there. Was yesterday I had I had a meeting with the guys in Move Ahead.
Yes.
It's an Irish company that's all about encouraging younger children to becoming more and more active through gamification. And during the conversation, whose name pops up is Grace McNamara, and she's actually working with the guys in Move Ahead and helping them. So it's great to see that not only is she doing a podcast, but she's following it through with great companies.
Yeah, and thankfully I'm lucky like that, Eamonn. Thank you. I mean, Move Ahead is a great example. Their physical literacy, Amy, so it's trying to convert this camera and screen time of kids into step back from it, but also physical literacy. So it's changing not only the dynamics of being in front of a screen, but getting back, assessing movement, and then giving real-time feedback in a games and in a play environment. So it's very engaging, evidence-based. It's super. They're a startup, so there's a lot of space to grow in this, but ultimately their ability to scale and integrate. And so likewise, lots of opportunities in the fitness space, lots of opportunities in the sports space, and lots of opportunities for parents, coaches, kids, and instructors around the world as well. So, yeah, Eamonn, I've got a few hands and a few pies at the moment, because we have to do something now, and I'm eager to do as much as I can while I can, which is why, thankfully, working with the likes of yourselves collaboratively is where we'll make ripples that are impactful. So thank you both for today, and thank you both for all of the work you've done beforehand and for the collaboration before this, and thank you also for the collaboration that we're going to all be doing in 2025 and beyond. We've lots of change to make together.
So say all of us, Grace. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can connect the dots with others by sharing this podcast with colleagues and teammates. At wearethecollective.world, you can join a professional network, avail of professional development, and engage your support team. We collaborate on the shared pursuit for gender balance in health and business. Until next time, keep connecting the dots.